All right, so just like having a supply and demand graph for individual markets or stores or industries, when we look at an economy or when we look at a state, we can look at the aggregate demand, the aggregate supply. So when we see these words aggregate, right, these really just mean total. So this is just our total demand, and this is our total supply. There's a couple of other definitions that we're going to want to define real quick, and they're slightly confusing because they are referring to the same thing. So the first one we're going to talk about is potential GDP. So instead of having a quantity on the x-axis and a price on the y-axis, when we do aggregate demand, aggregate supply, now we're going to have price level on the y-axis, and on the x-axis we're going to have real GDP, right? We're going to have GDP stripped of any kind of price action. So we have to define and talk about this thing called potential GDP. Potential GDP is defined to be the maximum quantity of output an economy can produce given full employment at the existing, we're in the short run here, levels of, well, we're not, yeah, I take that back about the short run because that's going to confuse us in a second. So just existing levels of labor, capital, physical capital, technology, and institutions. So real quick, some of you are probably like, what the hell are you talking about institutions? We're talking about like mental health or something, right? Like, no, when we're talking about institutions in economics, we are talking about the rules of the game. So this is not just the laws and the regulations, but also the kind of societal norms for doing business. You know, how often it takes for people to respond, how long it takes to get something seen by a judge or to get something, you know, ruled on, right? These are all institutional variables. The other ones are pretty simple, right? You know, labor is the amount of people you have and how skilled they are. Technology, you know, is the amount of programmers and computers and hadron colliders and, you know, lathes and things like that, right? And then physical capital, again, is kind of overlapping with technology because a lot of this technology takes the form of physical capital, but physical capital is also just buildings, desks, just regular computers, you know, pens, paper, so on and so forth, right? All right, so that's our potential GDP. So now we have the confusion of defining something that is exactly the same. So full employment GDP is just another name for potential GDP. But the full employment GDP specifies so it's not just that we're producing at potential, but also unemployment is at the natural rate of unemployment. Which I actually made a mistake last class and video, and it's not 2 to 4, it's 4 to 6% is our natural rate of unemployment. So just our typical amount of frictional and structural unemployment with no cyclical unemployment would give us 4 to 6% unemployment here. All right, so let's start defining the different parts of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. We'll start with aggregate supply.